Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Khilafat by ex-Brigadier Mustansar Billah. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Khilafat by ex-Brigadier Mustansar Billah. Lesson 8. In the last lesson, lesson 7, we had finished our first subject, that is, which will exist, the Western or Islamic civilization. Today, in this lesson, we move onwards. First, the modern mankind. The modern mankind. The modern mankind in the West has disbelieved, refuted Christianity, and turned secular, agnostic, has given up worshipping Jesus, Mary, and our Father. These didn't satisfy his soul, his objective analysis. These didn't satisfy his soul, his objective analysis. He had certain reservations, mainly about the concept of God, certain queries, and many doubts, and the spiritual problems for which he could not find satisfactory answers, and spiritual problems for which he could not find satisfactory answers, solutions, neither from the Bible nor from the peerage higher clergy. Battling with himself for years, he finally said, "O my religion, adieu. I can never live with you. Goodbye, Jesus. Goodbye, Mary. Goodbye, Father. I am not convinced that you are my gods. I am not convinced that you are my gods." It is the modern man who has had the courage and the conviction to question the faith, the values that his forefathers had passed on generations after generations. Intellectual giants but moral timids have replaced the intellectual timid. In an industrial and intellectual leap and in a technological syndrome, he has crossed many bounds of parochialism, bigoted thinking, and mental and emotional fixations, and plucked out the unconvincing, confusing, and dubious inherited beliefs. But his troubles are not yet over. The spiritual vacuum, the yearning of his soul to get close to God, is pulverizing, crushing, and he tries to escape, seek contentment, satisfaction in hedonism, belief in the importance of pleasures over all else, and in hedonism, belief in the importance of pleasures over all else. In his search for truth, the true God, to seek contentment and to get rid of social boredom, he has gone astray and began worshipping the idols of power and began worshipping the idols of power, money, beauty, popularity, and sex. He has gone astray and began worshipping the idols of power, money, beauty, popularity, and sex. Doesn't know the spiritual side of his existence at all. Doesn't know the spiritual side of his existence at all. Doesn't really know where to seek the truth and where to find that refulgent bright light that can illuminate his heart, his soul, his society, and in fact, the entire world. Doesn't know the spiritual side of his existence at all, doesn't really know where to seek the truth and where to find that refulgent bright light that can illuminate his heart, his soul, his society, and in fact, the entire mankind. This end of it. This is the subject of modern mankind. Now, understanding democracy. Understanding democracy. They say the end of democracy is near. How naive, alarming, isn't it? What about Fukuyama's end of history? The ruling ideology of the world. Yes, it's an ideology, all right. Should come to an end appears quite questionable. Anyway, let's begin ab initio, right from the beginning, with the definition of democracy first to proceed. The term democracy is derived from the Greek demos, people, and kratos, authority, that is, authority of the people. The word democracy is derived from the Greek demos, people, and kratos, authority, that is, authority of the people. It is generally understood as preeminently a manner of governing and being governed. Democracy has been defined in 101 ways, and the most popular definition in USA, after that of Abraham Lincoln, is of E.V. White. That is his definition. Democracy is the recurrent suspicion, E.V. White says, democracy is the recurrent suspicion that more than half the people are right more than half the time. That more than half the people are right more than half the time. Abraham Lincoln said, it is a system of government of the people, for the people, and by the people. As indicated by the word, democracy originated in the Greek city-states. The Greeks believed in different gods for almost everything of consequence. For example, the god of life, the god of death, marriage, health, rainfall, love, disease, and famine, etc. As per Greek mythology, no god interfered in the working of the other. So as per Greek mythology, no god interfered in the working of the other. So the Greek people prevailed over the king that if God had delegated his power to different subordinate gods, king wasn't superior to God. King wasn't superior to God. So the kings were forced to delegate their powers, and thus a type of democracy came into existence. This democracy prevailed in the Greek states from BC 508 to BC 338. However, Athens had an official religion, and so the church and the state were united. Interestingly, Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato, the greatest philosophers, were all bitter opponents of democracy. Socrates wrote that it was a very perverse system, and democracy was like a ship whose captain, that is, people, is ignorant of navigation, necessary knowledge about the weather and the stars. So he can, because of misperceptions, destroy the ship any moment. Eurygus, a philosopher in the famous city of Sparta, was asked about the efficacy of democracy. He replied, "First of all, go and follow democracy in your house." He replied, "First of all, go and follow democracy in your house." Democratic system is structured mainly on the following ingredients: 1. Secularism; 2. Nationalism; 3. Sovereignty of the people; 4. Majority is right, majoritarianism; and 5. Constitutionalism. We'll take them one by one. First today, secularism. Secularism. England, France, and USA are taken as the models of democracy. UK could have a written constitution by combining all the statutes after the Magna Carta, but they opted to be proud for having a constitution that's not written. Otherwise, too, their geography and demography provides them an inherent political and ideological social unity, the main purpose of any constitution. So, a study of the constitutions of USA and France reveals that both do not mention of any god or any concept of God or give any reference to the acceptance or existence of the hereafter. In fact, a look at all the constitutions of all the democracies of the world, whether Europe, whether of Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, or the Athens less Pakistan reveals that God hasn't been referred to anywhere. God hasn't been referred to anywhere. It is clear that in all democratic countries, the existence or any concept of God has no role in running the affairs of the states, political, administrative, judicial, economic, or social. It is clear that in all democratic countries, the existence or any concept of God has no role in running the affairs of the states, political, administrative, judicial, economic, or social. In other words, all democratic countries are essentially and constitutionally secular. In other words, all democratic countries are essentially and constitutionally secular. The existence of God, with reference to the affairs of the state, is not accepted in any constitution, and in the functioning of the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. The church is not permitted to have any role in the affairs of the state. The church is not permitted to have any role in the affairs of the state. The word secular is of new origin and is used in all the constitutions of democratic countries now. The word secular is of new origin and is used in all the constitutions of democratic countries now. In the, in the strict meaning of the word, democracy means rule by the many. That means many religions, which can create chaos at the state level, such as such efforts are made to keep church and state separate. Church shall not interfere in the affairs of the state, vice versa. The Constitution of USA states, Article 1 of the First Amendment, declared in force 15th December 1791, declared in force on 15th December 1791. It states the Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Reference this article, the American judiciary has always followed to the hilt what Jefferson termed wall of separation between the church and the state, what Jefferson termed wall of separation between the church and the state. For example, A. In 1962, the Supreme Court sustained the decision of Oregon Supreme Court, which banned state grants for religious textbooks to pupils of parochial schools, which banned state grants for religious textbooks to pupils of parochial schools. B. In the most famous release time case on record, the issue was a practice of the Board of Education in Champaign, Illinois, whereby privately selected religious instructors were permitted to teach religion during the school day on the public school premise on the public school premises to students whose parents had signed request cards. In an 8 is to 1 decision received with considerable hostility by the public at large, the court that practice held, held the practice to be unconstitutional on the grounds the court held the practice to be unconstitutional on the grounds that here not only are the state's tax-supported public school buildings used for the dissemination of religious doctrines. In fact, the state also affords sectarian groups an invaluable aid in that it helps to provide peoples for their religion classes through use of the state's compulsory public school machinery. Through the use of the state's compulsory public school machinery. This is not separation of church and state. This is not separation of church and state. Corey and Abraham, Elements of the Government, New York, Oxford University Press, 1964. Corey and Abraham, 1964. The line between Caesar and God has always remained a matter of dispute, discomfort, and frustration for the people in the West. It's not easy. The line between Caesar and God has always remained a matter of dispute, discomfort, and frustration for the people in the West. It's not easy to reconcile the imperatives of both political unity through secularism versus religion, political unity through secularism versus religion. Deep religious convictions demand more than verbal expressions and ceremonial practice. They urge the believer to act on them. They urge the believer to act on them. A faith that doesn't inspire action is scarcely a faith at all. Religious people want truth to be manifested, followed in the entire society. I quote, freedom of religion embraces two concepts, freedom to believe and freedom to act. The first is absolute, put in the nature of things. Conduct remains subject to regulation. This is Mr. Justice Roberts Cantwell versus Connecticut 310 US 291 1940. Freedom of religion embraces two concepts, freedom to believe and freedom to act. The first is absolute, but put in the nature of things, conduct remains subject to regulation. Deciding what belongs to the Caesar and what to God is a difficult, seemingly endless process, except in Islam, where nothing belongs to Caesar, everything belongs to Allah. Deciding what belongs to the Caesar and what to God is a difficult, seemingly endless process, except in Islam, where nothing belongs to Caesar, everything belongs to Allah. It accounts for much of the diversity, restrictions, frustrations, and discontentment in the West. Supreme Court rulings notwithstanding, there must have been certain compulsions that President Bush allocated $40 million in 2006 and 2007, $40 millions 2006 2007 from public money for the upkeep and other expenditures of the churches in USA. Western democracies displayed pathetically different attitudes and standards in dealing with the issues of Bosnia Muslims and East Timor Christians, Indonesia, whereas both were absolutely identical issues. Democratic government in Algeria wouldn't have been thwarted from a military coup sponsored by CIA, nor the elected government of Palestine traduced if they were Christians or secular. States shall not interfere in any excuse me. States shall not interfere in any matters of the religions, nor shall any religion be permitted to interfere in the affairs of the state. The state shall be run on the principles of secularism. The Article 2 of the Fifth Republic of France, adopted by the referendum of September 28, 1958, reads: France is a republic, indivisible, secular, democratic, and social. France is a republic, indivisible, secular, democratic, and social. Thus, we see that democracy is a secular ideology and a system in which man has been made and kept as the sovereign, and secularism has been established and enforced constitutionally and given a permanent security, whereas all religions have been encapsulated and turned merely into rituals. Whereas all religions have been encapsulated and turned merely into rituals. The democratic states may denounce religious influence in running the states, but the democratic states may denounce religious influence in running the states, but man, however secular he may claim to be, cannot divest himself from the compulsions of the soul. Today, religious themed products in stationery and books are being sold with success in the USA. And now a foot high plastic Jesus doll that quotes scriptures and a 3-inch Daniel and the Lion's Den are about to compete with Barbary and Bratz in the toys. The toys are based on stories from Bible. There are 12-inch Peter and Paul Messenger of Faith dolls that recite scriptures when a button is pressed. It may be interesting to see the response of the judiciary when these toys are marketed in France, where the Article 2 of the Constitution says France is a republic, indivisible, secular. France is a republic, indivisible, secular, democratic, is applied with a great gusto, ferocity on the Muslims only. This is applied with great gusto and ferocity on the Muslims only. In fact, there is a greater conjunction in Europe between Christian churches and secular movements. Nihilism, rejection of moral and religious principles, is applied to Islam only. Other religions, denominations are propping up quite fast. Thus, secularism and constitutionalism in the Western countries has failed to check the Christians and the Jews in their manifestation of religion in public life, and the demands of the soul will be difficult to control in coming years. Arnold J. Toynbee writes, the spiritual vacuum will not last long. That is, Western souls will not find it bearable to live without a religion for long. Arnold J. Toynbee, A Study of History, Oxford University Press, New York, 1965. Arnold J. Toynbee writes, the spiritual vacuum will not last long. That is, Western souls will not find it bearable to live without a religion for long. No wonder Islam is the fastest growing religion in USA. It's worth noting that Toynbee didn't specify any religion. He talks only of belief in one God. He talks only of belief in one God. Therefore, in case number one, democracy secularism is kept thriving in the West, the Western civilization will suffer a breakdown, disintegrate, come to an end, and join the graveyard of 16 previous civilizations which are extinct, exist no more. Two, in contradistinction, if the Western man rebels against democracy, secularism, if the Western man rebels against democracy, secularism, and opts for a religion, whatever it may be, and opts for a religion, whatever it may be, it will lead to the end of democracy and political disintegration of the democratic state. Three, it involves certain polemics, but a possibility exists that the ideological conflict between the secularism, that democracy, and spiritualism, the ideological conflict between the secularism, that is democracy, and spiritualism, religion, may become so protracted, inextricably intense, and overstretched that when the final rounds are fought, both may be so tired that they may countervail and take each other to death as two gladiators. In other words, the West may eventually end up with the end of democracy, that is, political disintegration, as well as the disintegration of the Western civilization. In other words, in the words of Shakespeare, like two spent swimmers who cling to each other and choke their art to death, like two swimmers who cling to each other and choke their art to death. In the words of Iqbal, in the words of Allama Iqbal, तुम्हारी तहजीब अपने खंजर से आप ही खुदकशी करेगी जो शाख नाजुक पे आशियाना बनेगा नापायदार होगा तुम्हारी तहजीब अपने खंजर से आप ही खुदकशी करेगी जो शाख नाजुक पे आशियाना बनेगा नापायदार होगा. Translation: paradoxically, your society will kill itself with its own knife. Paradoxically, your society will kill itself with its own knife. A nest on a fragile offshoot has a short life. A nest on a fragile offshoot has a short life. 4. And the last point. Another possibility, as per Toynbee, the Western civilization may be tempted to seize upon a collective humanity as an alternative object of idealization, as an alternative object of idealization. A religion of humanity. But he says the worship of collective humanity was tried by the Hellenic society 2000 years earlier too, embodied in the cults of Dea Roma and Diva Caesar, However, it couldn't sustain the onslaught of Christianity. So will it be again that this idol of collective humanity won't stand a spiritual onslaught based on any religion because the spiritual vacuum will have to be filled. Because the spiritual vacuum will have to be filled. That's all for today. Please pray for me. Lesson 8 ends here. Ex-Brigadier Mustansar Billah.